Me Michele, on the street lights on the corner. City vibes got a story. Feel the beat, don't ignore me.
Welcome into another episode of Talk To Me Michele. I am your host, Michele, with one L. What is poppin', people? If this is your first time tuning in, don't make it your last. Hit that subscribe button. And if you've been listening for a minute, I want you just to take a few seconds out of your day to leave me a review on wherever you listen to your podcast. And make sure you keep up with all the shenanigans and follow me on all social media platforms at Talk To Me Michele. All right, if you've been here before, you know my vibe. You know I enjoy real talk, good laughs, and great conversations that actually mean something. And today, I'm getting into it because it's officially February, and that means it's Black History Month. It's that time of the year when everybody suddenly remembers how much they love Dr. King quotes and start throwing kente cloth patterns on everything. But let's be real, Black history is way bigger than 1 month. And definitely, it didn't start with slavery or end with Barack Obama. On this episode, I want to do some highlights about how Black History Month came about because, y'all, it wasn't something that our schools randomly picked to have acknowledgement. And why it's important, beside the fact that, hey, we did help build this country. And whether we, as a community, are actually honoring our heritage or just letting corporations slap the first emoji on a tweet and call it a day. Some of the distractions that keep us from celebrating properly, like Super Bowl, Valentine's Day, and why some folks, especially certain political groups, are trying to erase Black history altogether. So it's going to get unpacked today, trust me. We're going to keep it real, keep it funny, and most importantly, keep it blackity black the whole way through. So grab your cocktails, it's time to get into it. Let's go back. Way back to 1926, when a brilliant brother named Carter G. Woodson decided that enough was enough. Because he was a historian, an educator, basically the father of Black history as we know it. He looked around and he realized, our people's contributions, they're being left out of textbooks. We're just background extras in American history. And we've never been in the background for anything. So he founded Negro History Week in 1926 because he knew that if we didn't start telling our own stories, they'd either be erased or rewritten to make us look like we were just happy to be here. And let me tell you, Carter was ahead of his time. There was no TikTok, no Instagram, just straight up books and determination. Fast forward to 1976, and we finally upgraded from a week to a whole month. And listen, I know some folks joke, why do we get the shortest month of the year? But there's actually a reason why Woodson picks February. He picked it because it lines up with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and also Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That's debatable, of course, but we're just going to give credit where it's due. Now, here we are nearly 100 years later, still fighting to make sure that Black history isn't reduced to MLK quotes. We're having this conversation because if Carter G. Woodson went through all the trouble to make sure our history was recognized, the least we can do is to make sure we actually know it. Let me get real for a second. Are we truly honoring our heritage? Or are we just doing it for the gram? Because honestly, I think it's a mix of both. Now, don't get me wrong. We do show up for our history. We've got amazing community efforts, educational programs, cultural events, social media activism, all the things that keep our history alive. If you think about it, a lot of this mirrors what the Black Panthers were doing back in the day. They weren't just about rocking black leather and throwing up their fists, even though they did it very well. They were into also feeding kids, educating the community, and making sure we knew our power. And in some ways, today's social media activism is a modern version of it. But here's where we slip up a little. Sometimes it does feel performative. We'll post all these MLK and Malcolm X quotes in February, but how many of us actually know or learn about them beyond that viral post? We'll wear kente cloth for a day, but how many of us are actively supporting Black-owned businesses year-round? We have to ask ourselves, are we celebrating Black history or are we just acknowledging it and moving on? Now let's talk about the younger generations. Are they as engaged as they should be? For me, I would say that's a yes and a no. Some are out here doing the work, learning, they're organizing, standing up for change. But then you've got the others who roll their eyes at the idea of watching anything historical, especially if it involves slavery. And listen, I get it. I do. We are tired of slave movies, but hear me out. Other communities, they don't never shy away from their history, no matter how painful it is. Take the Jewish community, for example. You will never hear them say, ugh, not another Holocaust movie. You'll never hear that, trust me, because they understand the power of never forgetting. They make sure that their history is told, respected, and taught so it never happens again. Meanwhile, we have people out here saying, I don't want to see another slave movie. And while I understand that, we do have to be careful because the moment we stop talking about our history, that's the moment we stop teaching it and it becomes easier for it to be erased. So are we honoring our heritage? I think we are, but I definitely know we could do better. It's not just about celebrating our history. It's about preserving it. And that means just being as vested in our past as we are in our future. Let's talk about the distractions. Yeah, they got some distractions in February because they come from every direction. Black History Month should be a time for reflection, education, and celebration, but instead, we're dodging corporate pandering, social media nonsense, and political foolishness left and right. So let me break this down. You got the commercialization of Black History Month, and AKA y'all ain't slick. Every February, these corporations suddenly remember we do exist. And here comes all these different commercials with soulful background music and a limited edition of Kente cloth sneaker drops and the McDonald's Black and Proud meal. And it's just a regular 10-piece chicken McNugget meal with a side of guilt. And listen, I love a good sale, but if your company only acknowledges Black people when it's profitable, please keep it. Because the real support means you're hiring us, you're promoting us, you're paying us fairly, and investing back in Black communities, not just slapping an MLK quote on a coffee cup. And have you noticed how social media and pop culture have a strong hold on Black identity? And while we've used these platforms to uplift our voices, sometimes they can also distract us from what really matters. We'll be in the middle of Black History Month, and instead of discussing our leaders, there are people actually fighting who's the better rapper, debating on relationship drama, or creating another ridiculous TikTok challenge. Meanwhile, our history is sitting on the shelf collecting dust. Look, I love entertainment just as well as the next person, but we cannot let these trending nonsense tactics distract us from the fact that our history is still being rewritten, ignored, and flat out erased. And speaking of being erased, let's get into political distractions. While we're out here arguing over the Super Bowl halftime show, certain lawmakers are out here banning Black history from schools. Their packaging is anti-woke nonsense. But let's be real, it's erasure. That's all it is. They want to make sure that history is more comfortable for certain people, which is just a fancy way of saying, we don't want y'all to know the truth. And let's not forget, they always find some random controversy every February to shift the attention away from the real discussions. And the biggest distraction is in our schools. They are still not teaching Black history the way they should. We always get this watered down version or a highlight reel every year. Slavery happened, but not for long. MLK had a dream. Rosa sat down so we could stand up. And Barack Obama was president. So the racism is over. The real work of the Black Panthers and everything else that would actually make people think. So if we don't actively seek out our own history, guess what? We won't know it. So what is the solution? Because we can enjoy pop culture and hold these corporations accountable and fight back against historical erasure at the same time. The key is balance. We need to call out the distractions, refocus on what truly matters. And if we don't take our history seriously, nobody else is going to. Now, I'm going to get into something very heavy, and this is the God's honest truth. Because the Trump administration, I'm going there. The 45th president didn't just give us crazy tweets and questionable hair. He also gave us some policies and rhetoric that really tried to undermine Black history, education, and our overall sense of dignity. Under the Trump administration, Black history wasn't just ignored. It was actively attacked. I mean, we're talking about the kind of rhetoric that felt like it was plucked right out of a bad history book. One that conveniently skips over everything that makes America uncomfortable. And instead of elevating the importance of Black history, this administration basically told us to shut up and go back to the classroom. It's like they're trying to rewrite history right before our eyes. From the rhetoric about both sides, during racial protests to minimize the history of slavery and segregation, this feels like a full-on assault on our truth. And there's also an attack on the critical race theory, which is also known as CRT. That's the boogeyman of modern politics. Suddenly, it's now an enemy of the people, especially when it came to teaching kids about racism and history. And the Trump administration has done its best to get rid of CRT, even though the theory itself is really just about understanding how race and racism have shaped society. But they've turned it into this big scary thing that it was going to brainwash students, when in reality, learn the truth about how America treated Black people and other communities of color, that was only going to make us smarter. And apparently some folks don't want that. And then came the book bans. Do you understand? This was like crack in schools. They were banning books like crazy. The Trump era saw a rise in book banning campaigns targeting books that address race, racism, and Black history. You shouldn't talk about slavery. Just don't talk about it. Don't mention the civil rights movement. So it's like they're living in a bad sequel of Fahrenheit 451. Books like the 1619 Project, that book was pulled from schools. All it was doing was teaching about Black contributions to history, which became something parents, lawmakers, and school boards fought against with a vengeance. And I was asking, like, okay, why are y'all doing that? Because acknowledging Black greatness from the civil rights era to modern day heroes reminds people that we built this country, and no amount of erasing history can change that. What we are seeing today is part of a larger fight for educational freedom. It's the fight to have honest, unfiltered conversations about race, history, and the truth about our shared past. Because what's at stake is not just what kids are learning today, but how they are going to view it and understand their future. It's a consistent battle to make sure that Black history doesn't get pushed to the back burner. The more we push back, the harder they have to try to suppress it. The truth is, Black history is American history, and it should be taught, discussed, celebrated year-round, not just during February when it's convenient. So we've talked about the distractions, the erasure, and everything in between. Let me get to the good stuff. How we can actually preserve and protect Black History Month and make sure our history stays in front and center 365 days a year. Because it's not just about February. It's about making sure the world knows our worth all year round. So how are we going to do that? I would like to say first we've got to support our historians, educators, and organizations that are devoted and dedicated to preserving Black history. These are folks who are fighting to keep the truth alive. From the Black History Month programming at your local library to the professors at universities, making sure every history lesson includes the Black perspective. And guess what? Supporting these organizations and these people is not even hard. It's as simple as buying books from Black authors, donating to Black history museums, and attending events that are hosted by Black organizations. Put your money where your mouth is. And if you're not sure where to start, do some research. Google is free. You'd be surprised at how many people are out here doing hard work and trying to make sure that history is not forgotten. Now, if we're going to really keep things going, we need to push for accurate Black history education in schools. Yes, I'm talking about making sure our kids know the real history, not just the feel-good stuff that makes people comfortable. So let's talk about the Harlem Renaissance, Black Wall Street Massacre, everything else that gets glossed over in high school history books. We need to advocate for curriculum changes that include more Black authors, Black scientists, Black artists, Black revolutionaries, for the full spectrum of Black history. And history is not a buffet. You just don't pick parts you want to serve. The real history is the whole meal. Okay, I want you guys to say this with me. Black History Month should be every month. One more time. Black History Month should be every month. February, that's a wonderful spotlight. But the other 11 months matter too. Don't put your Black History t-shirt in the back of the closet after February 28th. Every month, find something new to learn, whether it's listening to a new podcast, reading a biography, or just watching a documentary. Black history isn't just a one-and-done deal. We need to make Black history part of our daily lives. Share it with our kids, our friends, and even your random Facebook followers who might need a little education. Don't wait until next February to repost a Dr. King quote. Bring it up every chance you get. And social media can be a hot mess, but it's also a very powerful tool that can be used for education and awareness. If you have a platform, use it. Whether you're posting a quick fact on Instagram, a Black history thread on Twitter, or even a TikTok that dives into a historical event, we've got the power to shape narratives. The more we use social media for educating and amplifying Black voices, the more we keep our history in the spotlight. If you don't know something, just ask, then share it. Educating others doesn't mean you have to be an expert. It means you're taking part of the process and preserving our truth. And finally, let's talk about accountability. Every year, these companies roll out their Black History Month specials. But where is the action when February is over with? If they really want to be down with the culture, then hold them accountable. Are they hiring more Black executives? Are they supporting Black-owned businesses? Are they donating to causes that actually matter instead of just posting a hashtag? We've got to be the watchdogs, calling out performance gestures and holding institutions accountable for making real changes, not just in February, but year-round. Now, before I let y'all go, I want to encourage you on some Black excellence in everyday life because we've got some inventions by African Americans that have shaped the modern world. We've been innovating since day one, and a lot of things that we use every single day came from the brilliant minds of African American inventors. But do they get the credit? Barely. So I'm about to fix that right now. Imagine the world without traffic lights. Pure chaos. Every intersection will be a game of bumper cars. So we gotta thank Garrett Morgan for saving us from all that foolishness. In 1926, he patented the 3-signal traffic light, and now we mostly avoid car crashes at every turn. Now, if you're a 90s kid, this is the one that's going to hit home for you because the Super Soaker was created by NASA engineer Lonnie Johnson. Legendary. Before him, water fights were just little splashes of little tired guns, but he turned into a full water war. Now, if you love your Ring cameras and home security systems, you have to thank Marie Van Britten Brown, who created the first closed-circuit security system back in 1966. A Black woman made it possible for y'all to be nosy and safe at the same time. Before John Standard came through, folks were storing food like they were living in a cave. But his modifications to the refrigerator technology gave him the modern refrigerator. So if we didn't have John Standard, there'd be no leftovers. And that's a world I don't want to live in. Now, if you've ever laid your edges, detangled your curls, or even fried your hair straight, thank these Black women. Lydia Newman, she improved the hairbrush back in 1898. Madam C.J. Walker made sure that we all had a hot comb and hair products to keep us looking flawless. And without James E. West, we wouldn't have microphones for concerts, podcasts, or even your iPhone voice memos. So every time you hear your favorite artist or listen to this podcast, just know a Black man made the sound crystal clear. Ever been in the elevator and not fallen to your death? That's because Alexander Miles patented automatic elevator doors in 1887. Before that invention, folks had to manually open and close them. So that sounds like liability waiting to happen. And this one is real serious because George Crumb changed the snacking game forever when he created the potato chip in 1853. You've never had a sandwich without chips? Trash. We owe this man our gratitude, especially when we get to the bottom of the bag just to find that one perfect crunchy chip. Speaking of food, next time you scoop some ice cream, remember Alfred L. Crawley. Before him, people were just out here struggling using spoons and making a mess. Now we get perfect scoops every time. And if you've ever ignored a call or put somebody on hold, you better thank Shirley Ann Jackson. Her telecommunications research led her to caller ID and call waiting. She made it possible for us to screen calls and decide if we feel like answering it or not. So the next time you use any of these inventions, just know Black brilliance made it happen. We've been innovating, creating, and improving life for everybody for centuries, and we're still doing it today. All right, that's going to do it for this episode, but on this ending note, I want y'all to make sure that Black history doesn't get swept under the rug. Whether it's supporting our historians, pushing for accurate education, using social media, or holding corporations accountable, we've got to be active participants in preserving our heritage. Black History Month is a start, but our legacy, that's forever. But before I send you along your way, here are some final thoughts on what we can do to make Black History Month truly impactful. It starts with you. I mean, you listening right now. You're not just some consumer of history, you're part of it. So make this month count. But don't let it end when the calendar flips to March. Keep on learning, keep sharing, keep teaching. Black history doesn't just belong in February. It's a 365-day celebration. If you see something that sparks your interest, dive in. Read a book, watch a documentary, or attend an event. The knowledge is out there, and it's up to us to keep it alive and pass it on. So let's take some action. Get involved. Don't just post a black square on Instagram and call it a day. Read. Find out what you didn't know. Support Black institutions, whether it's a Black-owned business, Black history museums, or Black-led organizations. Let's not forget, demand better education. If we're going to keep our history alive, we need to make sure that the kids today and tomorrow know the full story, the good, the bad, and the empowering. I also want to take a moment for you guys tuning in and listening. This conversation doesn't stop here. Join the discussion, continue to spread the knowledge, and let's make sure that we keep moving forward together. And of course, a huge shout out to the MBG Podcast Network. The movement is strong, and we're continuing to spread Black excellence, one episode at a time. And you can support this podcast by visiting buymeacoffee.com/Talk To Me Michele with 1L, because let's be real, a little support goes a long way. That's going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you all. So until next time, I'm out. Peace.
Talk to me, Michele.